Greetings, retrogrades and parish orphans. Does the Latin Mass, that is to say the TLM, the Tridentine Latin Mass, need a rebrand? As always, these internecine, labyrinthine debates on Catholic Twitter, particularly far-right Catholic traditional Twitter, get had without a lot of insight. And this erupted about a week and a half ago, because the Latin Mass docuseries, which has become a full-on channel for popularizing the Tridentine Latin Mass, made the claim, look, we're trying to help repopularize the Latin Mass in an age when it is not completely universal or ubiquitous. It's not the only form of the rite. There are two forms of the Roman rite, as most of you out there who are listening know. So today I'm going to give, with characteristic fervor, a Rules for Retrogrades answer to the question, does the TLM need a rebranding? And it's going to have, as always, I hope, the characteristic insights of the channel. Before we do so, now that we're at the end of the year, I would point out a couple ways that folks can help this channel. We're about to cross 40,000 subscribers, which is exciting for us because this channel's only been really active for about 3 years. Please like this video, and more than anything, subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. I expect lots on today's video, but like and subscribe to the channel. Lots of people like videos, watch videos, even regularly, without subscribing to the channel. I'm guilty of that from time to time. Please subscribe to the channel. That's what we really need. Secondly, if you want to support this channel, there are two ways. And I don't mean buying the 5 books associated with the channel, which are Catholic Republic, Rules for Retrograde, the namesake, The Case for Patriarchy, Don't Go to College, or Ask Your Husband. Do so, but the more direct ways are two. Firstly, if you want to become a supporting patron where you get lots of goodies, which we upped this year in terms of
Christmas cards.
yeah, Christmas cards at the very least. Those should be on the way. Lots of heightened goodies for patrons in 2022. As promised, there will be even more in 2023 than this year. Become a patron today. Go to Timothy J. Gordon Patreon. If you want, on the other hand, to be a one-time donor to me as a man, because doing what we do carries with it the need for giving donative intent, donations, then you can do that also on timothyjgordon.com. That is no strings attached. That's not, you're not getting anything in return. You can even be a monthly donor. Go to DonorBox to do so. And I can tell you honestly, 2022 was a gnarly year for us and for the channel. So we really appreciate patrons. If you want to get a little something in return, become a patron. And if you want to just help me out, a man with a family, as has been popularized now, a dad with a webcam, it's a term I've grown to hate, then you can help out just in a strictly donative fashion. Go to DonorBox. We've been trying to give away more and more free stuff instead of selling classes. Usually we give them away now. So if you want to, not in return, but as a donative, strict gift, you can go to DonorBox. Both of those options are on timothyjgordon.com. We need help. Please do so today. Become a patron or a private donor, one time or even rolling. Okay, with that said, now I can talk to you a little bit about whether or not the TLM, the Latin Mass in its older form, the 1962 Missal or earlier, all qualify as the Tridentine Latin Mass, whether or not it needs a rebrand. What happened was Mass of the Ages, who has been contributing most directly to the rebrand of the Latin Mass, they made this simple statement that if the TLM is ever to gain the popularity that folks like them, folks like myself want it to gain, to regain, it must undergo a rebrand. And as always, the pearl clutchers and the LARPs on Twitter went nuts, largely, I think, out of bad faith. I don't know exactly what. Maybe I'm being hasty in rendering that judgment. But the reason I think it's in bad faith is because folks know that Mass of the Ages is 3 films deep into a radical repopularization of the Latin Mass in a time when, judging by appearances, the chips are down. The chips are down because Pope Francis has got the TLM against the ropes. Traditionis Custodes is now a year and a half old, and there are ostensible movements to make robust the punches on the ribs and the body and the face of the Latin Mass by Pope Francis. Right now, as we speak, getting texts from Mass of the Ages right now. So I think it's bad faith to criticize someone that says, look, we just want the Latin Mass to be super popular. We don't want the Novus Ordo to be popular, or really even a thing. But we want to repopularize it, and currently it's pulling about 1.5% of church-going Catholics in places like America. 1.5% market share if we're to run business diagnostics on Latin Mass versus Novus Ordo. Therefore, we want to repopularize it. Therefore, we, Mass of the Ages, deem it needs a rebrand. Well, I agree with this in the sense that they use the term. And this isn't, I think, a really difficult show to parse the 2 ways in which rebrand could be used. Now, I'm not a business guy. I got lots of degrees and they're all in humanity, mostly philosophy, law, literature, history. So I went to this site. What site is it? 3 types of rebranding at designsquid.com, if you need to know. And really, there's 2 main types of rebranding, and we parse the answer to the question that Mass of the Ages asked in any kind of reasonable way according to 2 of these types. There's a brand refresh, number 1. A brand refresh. I'll read the definition that designsquid.com gives for that in a second. Secondly, there's a full rebrand, and I'll read Design Squid's definition in a second. I think you can guess where I'm going with this. And I think the reason that you retrogrades and parish orphans out there can guess where I'm going with it is because it's sufficiently self-evident. To anybody that loves the Latin Mass, we probably want a brand refresh, and we probably don't want a full rebrand. And this is precisely what Mass of the Ages intended to say. So, what is a brand refresh, according to Design Squid? Brand refreshes can be as simple as updating your logo or shifting your mission focus. Both of those are reasonably simple. Both of those fall in the Aristotelian category of accidental properties of the thing. They didn't say that, I'm saying that. This is much less intensive than fully rebranding your company, but it does involve updating all existing copies of your logo. The Latin Mass doesn't really have a logo. Printing materials, your website, and other design pieces. That's a brand refresh. A brand refresh for the Latin Mass, which has been under attack since, let's call it 1963, when Sacrosanctum Concilium was published, the first of the 4 ecumenical council documents from VC2. And, of course, it underwent a 6-year congressional subcommittee tinkering led by the infamous Annibale Bonini. And that culminated in December of 1969 with the release of the actual work product that is the stinky Novus Ordo product. The church doesn't call it that, but we call it that. And so, whether you count 1963 or 1969, late 1969 as the dead date, the date of the time beginning at which we probably need some sort of partial rebrand. I think anyone that loves the TLM can agree. It's under an attack, and virtually any time a campaign or a popular push, a popular lobby, comes under an attack, any kind of directional shift, whether it's a counterattack, a counterpunch, whether it's a certain branding of defense where you say, no, this is why their punch missed, whether it's a kind of come over the top and reassert your principles, that itself counts as a brand refresh. I think these are business terms, so they're the stupidest terms out there. They're not philosophical. They're not coherent in the satisfying sense that something that Plato or Aristotle or Thomas Aquinas or Bellarmine have dealt with. So we're using the crass, rough and ready-made technology terms of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And we're doing our best job. I'd say a brand refresh counts as any kind of, in the age of television or the age of the internet, any kind of response to an attack. Furthermore, in further justification of Mass of the Ages assertion that we need at least a brand refresh, probably a brand refresh, I won't say at least, I would point out this brute fact that I wanted my friend Joe Boca, SSPX Joe, to come on with me today. He had a plan and then something came up. So this was going to be a dialogue. It's better done as a dialogue than a monologue. This stuff just isn't that complex. I like to do dialogues when the topic is simple. But here's a QED for you, folks that were mad at Mass of the Ages for saying brand refresh, the TLM. The market share is roughly 1.5% among church-going Catholics. It's your major premise. There's another major premise, which is that we all agree, all of us pro-TLM folks, traditionalists of all stripe. I'm a terrible traditionalist in lots of senses, but I am a traditionalist because I love the TLM and I'm a TLM supremacist. That's the best mark. We say it's the best product out there. So we're asserting simultaneously the TLM pulls about 1.5% market share, which is pathetic, and it's the superior product on the market. What if the superior product in any other market were pulling 1.5% market share? You'd say, definitely. You might even suggest, a lot of you in other contexts might even suggest that more than a brand refresh, you need a full rebrand, which is the second type of rebranding that I don't think the TLM needs. And I don't think Jake or Cameron or any of the folks at Mass of the Ages think it needs. But that's a powerful, these are two major premises, right? It's the best product out there. We all strongly assert. We don't have to prove that to each other. We assume it arguendo because we're in agreement. And number two, another fact is it's about 1.5%, at most 2% market share. Church-going Catholics don't go to the TLM by and large. Okay, then the minor premise is we would expect, generally speaking, a partial rebranding, a brand refresh is needed for superior products that are not pulling a superior market share. That's your minor premise. Therefore, we need a brand refresh, right? It follows from that syllogism. And I think this is a kind of syllogism with two major premises, one minor premise. I just don't think we have to dialogue this that long. It's a superior product that's not getting its due. Folks will say, well, look, under Francis, he's been beating up on it harder than it had been in a while, starting in 2013. Mocking repeatedly in 2013, 2014, 2015, dig, there's psychological problems with young people that go to the Latin Mass. The Latin Mass people are stingy, they're stodgy. He's strongly associated us with the coprophagiacs and coprophiliacs, two terms he taught me. Thank you very much, Holy Father. He's saying we're shit eaters. That's literally what he's saying. That's what the term meant. I had to look it up because I'm not a pervert. And he also said that there is a lack of charity. He's more recently said, not in 2013, 14, or 15, but more recently he said that if you go to the Latin Mass, this is infidelity to the magisterium. Whoa. So he's been beating up on it over the last 10 years, and it's easy for someone on the other side of the question, whether or not it needs a rebranding, to say, oh, that's just under Francis. Francis has made it impossible to go to. This is what covers the explanatory gap for why only 1.5% of church-going Catholics go to it, right? Wrong. We had a little less than 9 years of Pope Benedict, who, guess what? Ushered in a new kind of golden era for the TLM with Summorum Pontificum. That was about halfway through his pontificate. So yes, it didn't achieve the full springtime that he expected. I didn't never expect it. He needed to move more vigorously in defense of the restoration project of liturgy and all the things that fall upon liturgy. But you still have the second half of the Benedict pontificate before Francis came in, abusive stepfather, and beat the hell out of all the good things that were flowering. So we had Summorum Pontificum for 5 years, and we weren't getting a lot of movement. So even when the pontiff had made it requisite that bishops' permission were not, the pontiff made it requisite that the bishop's permission to say the Latin Mass in his diocese was not requisite. Basically, any priest could do it anywhere where enough people were asking for it. It's still only 1.5%. Maybe it reached 2% market share. I'd have to ask Jake and Cameron at Mass of the Ages, but it didn't do much. As a matter of fact, well, first off, I want to go to this matter of fact. 2018 is when the people got really excited about the Latin Mass. We're going to talk about that. 2018 is when people got re-excited. You had the faithful that never left it, that were attending society chapels from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Good for them. But there was no kind of reflowering or repopularization or re-energization of the movement. They kept it. They were tried and true. I'm talking mainly to SSPX folks. Give them credit for that. But they were doing little or nothing to repopularize it. Okay? Even Benedict's Summorum Pontificum in summer of 07, I think, even that did not much to repopularize. No, in summer of 07 was less than halfway to through his pontificate, right? It was 2 years in. So most of his pontificate was post Summorum Pontificum, which makes our position stronger. That makes my position even stronger, that it wasn't a full halfway through. I was doing the math wrong in my head there. So that's interesting, because you didn't get as much verve and as much of a reflowering, as much re-energization toward the Latin Mass in 2007 under Summorum Pontificum as you did in fall of 2018 after the Summer of Shame. I know, because I was very much a part of that. TNT was an exciting time to be a Latin Mass Catholic. I'd been one for 12 years. And folks got excited in a way that they hadn't been excited in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Now, I know there are folks that kept the faith that whole time, if you consider the faith attendance of the TLM, mostly society folks, but they were doing nothing to repopularize it. You might see where I'm headed now. It started to get really popular again a little bit in the late Benedict pontificate, and especially after the Summer of Shame. So there was a rebrand in late 2018, early 2019, and that's why a lot of you folks out there that write me, a lot of folks watching this live stream, you'd say, yeah, I started going in late 2018, early 2019. That's when I started going. That was because it was being rebranded. Not just by TNT, but largely by TNT, largely by the events in the church which necessitated something new. Got all these perv molesters. And we associate that with the Novus Ordo Church. Well, all corners of the church have this problem, it turns out. But it's mostly with the corrupted Novus Ordo Church. Let me jump to what I don't think the TLM needs. The second type, a full rebrand. A full rebrand is tearing down and building your brand back up from the foundation. Don't need that. Jake and Cameron don't think we need that. Mass of the Ages has done nothing of the sort, tearing it all the way down and building it all the way back up. So go pound rocks. If you don't like that, go pound sand. If you don't like this type, the full rebrand, and you're trying to associate it with the suggestion of Mass of the Ages, they never suggested a full rebrand. They don't want to tear down the TLM brand and build it all the way back up from the foundation. They don't.
They just made movies about how beautiful the TLM is.
It's retarded.
It's retarded.
These people are just looking for something to get mad about. Maybe you're expanding your market into another industry. This doesn't really apply. Or maybe there was a huge change in management. Well, yeah, we had that with Francis. You go from Benedict XVI, who I guess loves the Latin Mass. I still don't know why he left us. I still don't understand what happened with Benedict XVI. And neither do you, even if you're a big Benedict fan. You don't know from Adam what was going through Benedict's head. But he abandoned the Latin Mass movement. He gave it over to the guy that he knew was likely to be pontiff. Second place in the 2005 conclave voting. It was Bergoglio. He knew there was this big cadre, sizable, muscular cadre of anti-Benedict cardinals that had given this Bergoglio guy a good chance in the 2005 conclave. He should have known what would have prevailed in 2013. He's a smart man. He should have known more or less what Francis was going to do to the Latin Mass movement. I think he did know. Didn't stop him from leaving. Why did he leave? Still don't have answers as we approach the conclusion of year 10 when he left because he was about to die. I just don't buy it. So there was a huge change in management, but I don't think we need a full rebrand. I don't think Jake or Cameron think we need a full rebrand. I think they would reject it. It says either way, a full rebrand is labor intensive. So in the sense of a brand refresh, which can be something as simple as responding to an attack with a counterattack, covering your ribs, or just coming over the top with some more. Those are all three responses to an attack. You know this if you watch boxing. They're basically the three things you can do when you're getting hit against the ropes. Counterpunch, fast strategic punches back, right? You can just cover up, or you can come over the top with power punches that are likely to miss. That's it. That counts as a rebrand. And we have to do that by virtue of the fact that Francis took over and is attacking it. He reversed the small positive momentum garnered by the previous pontiff, Benedict XVI. That's a rebrand right away. But what I'd urge you guys is that whether or not there was some rebrand under the Francis pontificate in late 2018, early 2019, a lot of people associate it with what they were watching TNT and they started going to the Latin Mass sometime in that time period, which is a lot of you. Whether or not you affirm that or deny that, okay. Well, there has to be some sort of motion because during the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you had holding steady less than 2%. I think way less than 2%. During the 70s, 80s, 90s, when it was just the tried and true folks going to the society chapels, I'm leaving intentionally aside canonical status and all that. I'm just giving them credit here, irrespective of what they traded to continue going to the good liturgy the whole time. It was well under 2%. I think it might have been well under 1% attendance. Good for them. You go to the good movie, but everyone else is going to see the crappy day film. Well, don't you want everybody else to come with you? So in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you got 1%, let's say, going to the TLM. Well, yeah. First, most I care about me and my family and our circle of friends. But I also care about the other Catholics out there. I don't want them seeing the crappy matinee if it's possible. And so the folks that were living this way in the 70s, 80s, 90s, I'm not attacking them. I'm just saying they decisively, now I'm opening a new avenue here, are a different type of pro-TLM Catholic than, say, I am, or I think Cameron or Jake is. In what sense? There are de facto two pro-TLM movements that are revealed underneath all the rancor, all the squabbling that Jake and Cameron's comment or tweet brought about. There are two types of pro-TLM Catholic. They're both sincerely pro-TLM. They're both sincerely TLM supremacists. But one kind, I'd say most folks that attend society chapels, I'm not saying they don't want the TLM to be super popular. Maybe some of them actually don't want it to because they like having the exclusive social club, but they don't necessarily care whether or not the TLM is ever popular, universal, even ubiquitous ever again. And I think that's what was going on when I was growing up in the 80s. Being rendered, I saw Michael Knowles say this to Matt Fradd, basically a atheist by my confirmation, because I'd been going to Novus Ordo masses. I really don't think I would have if I'd been going to the TLM that whole time, with all of the proper accidents that correspond with it. I can sincerely say I'm not looking to feed into victimhood culture, but I don't think, I've said this on TNT, I've said this ever since, I've maintained it. I don't think I ever would have been agnostic atheist by my confirmation when I was in 8th grade if I'd been going to the TLM. And that's because I'm not blaming the victims, the people that were just struggling to, I guess, sustain their attendance at the TLM. But those people, at the very least, if I'm being most charitable to those folks, they have their nose to the grindstone, just keeping a place for themselves and their families to go to the Latin Mass. And they didn't have the time or maybe the resources to fight back in a meaningful way to universalize the Latin Mass. So that's that type. They don't care much whether it's ever universal again. But then folks like me or Taylor Marshall or Jake or Cameron from Mass of the Ages or lots of other channels out there. Lots of other channels. There are a lot of channels now. Catholic YouTube, if you look at the charts, it just blossomed after 2018, 2019. Lots of people doing what I do, what Taylor Marshall does, that have sprung up in the last 3 years. Most of them agree. They want to re-universalize it. They're not content to just go to bring their family to the Latin Mass. They want it to be the only form of the rite again. That's a second type of pro-TLM person, not just the people attending the society chapels the last 50 years. Now, I'm not sure that all these other modern pro-TLM Catholic traditionalists on YouTube agree with me, because a lot of them were the ones that were taking after Mass of the Ages. And I don't get how you take after Mass of the Ages for saying what ought to be the credo of this second type of pro-TLMer. We need a rebrand. We have a superior product that has failed on the market. And it failed even under 6 years of Pope Benedict, who was allowing it to be basically universal again by taking it out of the bishop's hands. Hey, in comments, rebut me. I'd love to respond, especially to rebutting comments today. I'd love it. Nothing would please me more greatly. But I do want to point out that what I'm saying now that you probably haven't heard elsewhere corresponds with what they call a third type of rebranding. Even though there are two fundamental ones, brand refresh, which we want for the TLM, full rebrand, which we don't want for the TLM. There's a third kind of mini type, and it's called a brand merger. And I would motivate the view that the brand merger isn't a third type. It constitutes what sort of brand refresh we want and need, because it's a merger of two types of pro-TLM movements that now exist. You have the old guard, the guys in the 70s, 80s, 90s, probably going to society chapels that kept the faith. Good for them in that sense. But we're doing little to nothing to repopularize the Latin Mass. Then you have the new guard. And I'm very much one of the representative faces of the new guard, along with Taylor, along with Cameron and Jake. And there are lots of others as well. we need a brand merger because we have to get ourselves together, the two types of TLM advocates. We all agree it's supreme. It's better than the Novus Ordo. We all agree we want the Novus Ordo to go away, even though that's not in our power. And we have to say, well, what are we going to do to repopularize? And if the old guard says, well, we want the TLM, but we don't want to popularize it, we want it to stay around 1% attendance, I would say, how much love do you have for it? And I think you guys, parish orphans and retrogrades, should be the ones interrogating to that effect. Here's what a brand merger is. We're trying to merge two brands, ones that want everyone to go to the TLM and ones that might not care or might even only want a small minority to have like a social club. This type of rebranding happens when two existing brands, old guard, new guard, come together to form a new brand. Brands will morph together when there's an acquisition. Brand mergers work best when the two brands are cohesive with one another. That's what I'm not sure about, and that's the real insight that I can offer you today, is just to pose that question. Are the two brands, old TLM goers, mostly SSPX or SSPX adjacents, and new TLM types, like me? I started going before, to my best knowledge, about a year before Summorum Pontificum, at a very corny, very corporate, very major diocesan church community in Bakersfield, California, at a 2 p.m. Mass with Father Ralph Belwamini, God rest his soul, very close friend of Steph's and mine. That was in 2006. And I'm very, very, very representative of the New Guard because I've never been to a society Latin Mass. Even though technically it's licit. I've never been to an SSPX chapel for Mass. So I'm definitely the New Guard. But I want it universal. I want it completely ubiquitous, in fact. I know for a virtual certainty that the Novus Ordo will not survive the 21st century. No clue how it's going to happen or what the particulars will be. I just know there's a wide enthusiasm gap, and enthusiasm gaps are destiny. Look at the 2016 election, Trump versus Hillary. No one loves the Novus Ordo. Funded goons, and more than goons, funded normies in the church defend it constantly. There's no enthusiasm for it. No one loves the Novus Ordo, aside from maybe the people that weaponized it in the first place to wreak havoc. They're the only ones that love it. The ones that go to it defend it out of a kind of funded necessity. Everyone who goes to the TLM loves it and appreciates it. This itself is a rebrand. And to say, as I'm saying, a kind of New Guard TLM guy, one of the faces thereof, if I'm saying, look, we need to get together with the old guard TLM guys, you guys are the OGs in a sense, but you're not the OGs of repopularizing it. You don't seem to care. We need to get together and make sense of this. This is what I was going to ask Joe. If Joe were on the show today, he could text me his answer. Does it matter whether the TLM's popular? If you're a supremacist, if you're a TLM supremacist, you want it to be the only liturgy, presumably. But that's from the point of view of me. I'm a new guard guy. I actually want the Novus Ordo to go away. It's not going to go away by these tired old canonical arguments of, oh, no pope was able to do this. Benedict began to prove that, though he did, like everything Benedict did, it was weak, it was soft. He's a quitter, Benedict the 16th. But he did begin to show that. Yeah, we're not gonna rule this canonically invalid. It's more likely that Francis's pontificate will be ruled canonically invalid than the change for 50 tawdry years to the Novus Ordo, 70, 90, however long this sham lasts. There's a much stronger case against, I'm not saying I'm a Benedictist, a Benedictist Pope guy, because I'm not, but I can acknowledge there's a stronger case that Francis isn't Pope than that we're ever going to canonically overturn the fact that the Novus Ordo was ever licit. No. All we're going to do is we're going to pivot away from it. It's going to be pivoted away from. Maybe in my life, maybe shortly after. Maybe in your life, maybe shortly after. I can almost promise you that. But the question is, do the old guard, who were kind of overrepresented by the umbrage taken to Jake or Cameron's Mass of the Ages rebranding remark, the umbrage taken to it represents the old guard for this reason. It was even if it was from guys younger than me who aren't part of the old guard, they were trying to sound like they were down with the old guard by going, we don't need a rebrand. The Latin Mass doesn't need anything. Really? I'm not saying to change a single lick of the Mass. Not a corpuscle, not a whit. But it needs a rebrand if you want it to be. Should it be the only Mass? Hell yeah, it should. Well, how are you going to get there, man? How are you going to get there? These people refuse to think critically. How are you going to get that? From 1969 to now it's nearly 2023, they refuse to speak in philosophers' terms. This is why I get sick of all the theology. Let's talk like philosophers. It's a superior product, yes. I know I'm being redundant now. It pulls 1 to 1.5% market share, yes. And yet you claim you want it to be universal. All those things can't be checks. You got to have an X in at least one of those 3 categories. They don't go together. If you're the type of person that says, no, we don't need to do one thing different. We don't. That doesn't work. It's like a highlights magazine. Which of these things don't go together? If it's a superior product, we can't, and it's pulling a pathetic market share, even when it was the free choice basically of the laity to get Latin Masses under Benedict. And for large parts of Francis just made this change a summer and a half ago. So for about 10 years, from 07 to 17, from 07 to well beyond it, to 21, summer, you had the free choice. You had 13 years. Even though Francis was beating up on the TLM, you had 13 years of basically any parish could get it, as long as their pastor wasn't a flaming gay about it. And that's a significant amount of those parishes. But you could find, even if your bishop was a flaming gay about it, you could find one of the 3 parishes in town that had at least a neutral guy where he's like, oh, whatever's most popular, I'll do. Get 20 parishioners together and you could have gotten a Latin Mass. And guess what? A rebrand of the type that Mass of the Ages advocated, and I advocate, that qualifies even something like awareness creation, which is what you had to have under Francis. Awareness creation is rebranding of the type they're talking about.
Which is what Mass of the Ages is.
Which is what Mass of the Ages is.
That was what they did, and everyone loved them for that. They were popularizing or trying to popularize the Latin Mass. And then the minute that they're like, hey, to go along with what we're doing, we want to increase numbers even more, people were like, oh no, not on our watch. You're not going to do that.
Right. That's what TNT was largely. We created awareness about St. Gallen Mafia, infiltration in the church. And we created awareness about, hey, did you know you can go to a TLM? And people were like, really? Yeah, there's one in your town. It was still pre-Traditionis Custodes. There's one in your town if you live in a medium-sized town or bigger. People were like, really? I'm going to start going. They got hundreds, thousands of emails. Hey, Tim, I started going. Hey, Taylor, I started going. We were talking about it. It was exciting. That was a rebrand. You guys don't get it, or you don't want to get it if you're mad at Mass of the Ages or me for saying this. A rebrand does not mean a full rebrand. That's not what anyone's talking about. Also, there's repurposing the product where you're like, no, we have to go back to the drawing board and change the product. That's even worse than the second type of rebrand, which we're not advocating for. But the third type of rebrand, I'm telling you now, the straight dope is, the third type is most telling. It's, are we going to merge the old guard pro-TLMers and the new guard pro-TLMers or not? Are we going to continue to have this tension? because the New Guard TLMers are less concerned about the other Vatican II documents. I'll speak for myself. Are they going to hold out? Because the New Guard TLMers really want the Novus Ordo effectively to go away, and I'm not sure that the Old Guard TLMers do. People out there are shaking their heads going, no, of course they do. Okay, well, if they do, then join us in the ongoing rebrand. If you want what you have now to continue, you go to your society chapel, or maybe just your FSSP or ICK chapel, your Ecclesia Dei institutions. If you want that to continue, then I guess you could say no major new rebrand, or no even partial rebrand. But then I would question you. Did you know that of the 22, 23 rites in the Catholic Church, there's only one rite, the Roman rite, with 2 forms? Is that not queer? I've heard you guys, you old guard TLMers, yelling about it, how queer it is. And I agreed. That needs to go away. We agree which one needs to go away. The one with no enthusiasm, the one with no tradition, the one with no heart, the one with no life. The Novus Ordo. Some of you guys call it the bogus ordo. I don't join you there. I just say it's a pretty fake and gay way to spend the first part of your Sunday most of the time. Basically, it puts you in a weird, corny mood if you have to go to a Novus Ordo. I went to one last night. It was horrible. I mean, so you either agree that it needs to go away, and therefore we need to create awareness, or you think, no, I like having my social club. I like having something over all the plebes, the 98.5% that just go to the Novus Ordo. I like having something over them. I don't want to say it outright because that sounds kind of uncharitable and kind of ugly on my part. But is that really what it is? Your behaviors will tell. Join us, Old and New Guard. And this doesn't have to be a hooray for everything kumbaya. It just has to be an acknowledgement. The acknowledgement, the proof, comes in the pudding. And that will be, let's rebrand it. Let's create more awareness. Let's get more folks at the Latin Mass. And no, it doesn't matter whether it's a diocesan one, an Ecclesia Dei one, or an SSPX chapel. Let's get people to the Latin Mass any way we can. The boomers are dying off. Sorry, boomers. You guys are the ones that really, really, really made this feel like the norm. I mean, you made it the numerical norm. The TLM, insofar as we need to create new awareness that hasn't been there in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, needs that much of a rebrand. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah. Okay.
Let's see here. I'm getting some here. If Jesus does not bring you to the TLM, no advertising technique will work.
Jesus didn't bring me to the TLM. Okay. That's not, he didn't. You mean like he comes down? See, I mean, we can start talking like we're Muslims, folks. Who made that remark? We can start talking like we're Muslims, like the Quran fell out of the sky. That Jesus did not bring me to the TLM. Providence is there, right? God probably affirms me going to the TLM in his wise will, if I had to guess, not just his permissive will. But that's not the same thing as Jesus leading me to the TLM. We try to avoid that hoary language on this channel. I went to the TLM because I had a natural aptitude for, one, making fun of corny stuff. I just hated the Novus Ordo my whole life. And then when I literally just found out from a priest that we'd recently befriended, an Italian priest that would eventually teach us Italian and visit us when we lived in Italy, in Rome. He was doing the Latin Mass. I knew he was grouchy and cool and Italian and old and hated new, gay, fake stuff. I was like, let me try. He does this old Latin Mass. I didn't even know this was done. So let's try going a couple times at 2 p.m. I would say Father Ralph Belwamini brought me to the Latin Mass, attracted me to the Latin Mass. And okay, that's not the same thing as Jesus bringing me there. That's not a denial of providence. But Father Ralph did. In other words, he branded it a certain way. See, you just, when you use the hoary language, it enables you to affirm whatever propositions you want. And that's really counterproductive. Use real language, technical language, propositional language, philosophical, modal logical language. And say it was Father Ralph Bewamini that really got me to go, because his brand was cool. He would have made fun of as probably some Homo sapien, the kind of felt banners and kumbaya clapping, at a typical Focus teen mass or something. I was like, well, I like him. I like how he hates that stuff. He's super grouchy to people. I like that. So I'm going to go to his Latin Mass thing, and that also seems cooler. I also knew before I'd ever set foot in one, that probably is way cooler. It's probably way ungay. And then I went, and you got the aesthetic benefits, but also the spiritual benefits. Father Ralph brought me. He branded. Because of his brand, I went. And because of my brand, some of my younger friends started to go. Right? My students. They liked, oh, this person makes fun of these worst trappings of the 70s, 80s church that we thought accurately characterized the entire church. And our theology teacher saying, no. That's the bad new church. Look at this old Coke. Don't drink new Coke. That's Marshall's analogy. Okay? So it was not Jesus that brought me. It was Father Ralph Bewamini. And I've brought lots of different people to the Latin Mass. It's not a denial of providence. I live in the real world. How about another one?
There's quite a few. I'll read more of them, but also can I just, for my own part, stick up for Mass of the Ages just real fast, and let's all have like a family meeting about this as trad Catholics. I'm not understanding the lack of, I hate using this word, but I'm going to throw it out here, the charity to Mass of the Ages. When they, for those of you who weren't aware of what happened, it was a tweet that they had used the word rebranding. They want more people going to the Latin Mass. They used the word rebranding, and people melted down into hysterics, not understanding or realizing that the entire reason why people loved those documentaries was because they were popularizing something that they loved, the Latin Mass. So they were getting mad at them. It was very strange.
Before you go to the next question, anyone, if you want to ask a question, put in parentheses the year you started going. We're going to get to the bottom of this right now. I know the year a lot of you started going. You're not going to catch me out here. It'll be the other way around. Unless you're an old guard guy that's been going the whole time. I don't have a lot of them in my audience. Year in parentheses that you started going. Yeah, you can lie around it. But we're going to get to the bottom of this. There was a Latin Mass rebrand in late 2018, early 2019. And that's when you started going.
I think people had a hard time with the word rebranding because they were putting it up against the holy eternal Mass. And there's like, how dare you talk about the Mass in such crass terms? And they weren't looking at what Mass of the Ages has been doing and what they've been trying to accomplish for all of us. And they're doing the hard work. And what I was seeing on Twitter is that all these trad Catholics were turning against them. And I'm like, guys, this is our tribe. These are our guys.
Yeah.
How about just a thank you, Mass of the Ages, instead of just always looking for a reason to gripe? I don't understand it. Okay, next question.
But again, so the person that asked that question, I want the year you began attending the Latin Mass, the TLM, and I want a solid answer to the question. Do you want it universal then? I'm gathering if you don't want to rebrand, then business as usual is fine. Oh, and that's right. You want Jesus to come down from heaven and lead people to Latin Mass. Okay, you wait for that. While you're waiting for that, I'll be leading thousands of more people to the Latin Mass. Okay, good talking to you. That's called a rebrand, by the way.
Somebody says, I think that the pastoral issues in the modern TLM is less of what needs to be rebranded. The congregation is what sets the tone. Maybe rebrand there would be most effective for your cause.
Well, I agree with that. That's still a rebrand. Agreed. And that's also the rebrand that was most prominent in the Mass of the Ages tweet. Is like, look, there's problems with, there's been problems with the appearance of the folks that go. And a lot of the old guard people seem like they don't want to bring new people in. And I've said, look, well, why don't we try to get more athletic types in? And that's happened since late 2018, early 2019. Why does this just have to be a pretty clear, again, Highlights magazine? TLM has, the Novus Ordo has either people that just don't know what they're talking about, which is a lot of them, but therefore they have some people that look like they might be able to throw or catch a football, in the Mass. The TLM prior to 2018 very rarely looked, because I did start going in 2006, very rarely looked like it had many people that could throw or catch a football. That's a rebrand. So that's what I said. Why don't we do appeal to some of the more athletic types? They need heaven too. And to the extent that you and I feel that you're more likely to go to heaven if you go to the TLM, because I do think there's a correlation, we need those more athletic types to be in the TLM too. Let's have some more questions, but let's have the year you started going if you're going to ask.
Lots of people are putting their years in. I'll read them. Some of the older questions don't have that, but this person says, what Mass of the Ages is doing kind of reminds me of what Trump did with his approach to politics when he was president. This might be a horrible comparison, but this is how I see it.
Yeah, I think it's a good comparison. I'm not a garment terror. I know what you're talking about. Now, all the dummies out there will go, you're saying Trump is the liturgy, the Latin version? He doesn't even speak Latin. No, I get what you're saying. You're saying what's needed is, it can even be confrontational. This is where I am different from Jake and Cameron. I like confrontation. Not in the sense that I'm, just like to fight, but I like to fight when it's appropriate to fight. And I think that the TLM, a lot of the old guard people will be sighing in relief if they hear me say this. It could part of the rebrand can still be the confrontationality. I mean the kind of rapprochement, new Coke to old Coke. I want to keep that rapprochement, at least in terms of the comparison, the start comparison. I want to keep that part of the rebrand. I just want to do it better than anyone's done it over the last 50 years, 50, 60 years, really. So I agree with you. And that is what Trump did. He brought about the rapprochement with the corrupt Republican Party. He said, I'm going to be different. And he, kind of like Benedict XVI, he only delivered on about a third of his promises, but that was better than none. We have other comments? Yeah, let's have a year people started going, because that's the real proof of purchase here. A lot of people started going in early 2019. That's just a fact. And I've seen thousands of emails to confirm that. Do you have any comments?
Somebody said, do you think your hoodie is likely to make anyone read Plato and Aristotle? There's your answer.
No, I wasn't trying to get them to read Plato and Aristotle, and I didn't ask a question either. So I guess that's supposed to be punchy, but no, it's people that like to read Plato and Aristotle and like to play basketball will like the hoodie. Now, as for the Latin Mass, again, the incoherent question notwithstanding, I'll say this. Should we stick with 1.5% market share? Or is this some sui generis realm of human life, unique, utterly unique realm of human life, wherein it's appropriate to have a superior product to the Latin Mass, losing out in the marketplace of ideas to a grossly inferior one like the Novus Ordo? Do you want that? And if so, why? That's my counter question, sweatshirt guy. Why should a superior product lose out to an inferior product? Is it because all the people that attend Novus Ordo are plebes unworthy of salvation? That is so ridiculous. It's because they don't know about it, because the church has striven to cover it up. That means we, the lay who love the TLM, have to talk about it. And when we talk about it, we have to talk about it with certain words. You can't just wear a color. You have to wear a certain color. When you talk about something, you have to use certain words. That's called branding, friends.
And
now I sound like Bishop.
Maybe, not everybody that attends the TLM, but also maybe people who aren't going to the TLM are seeing what everyone else is seeing on Twitter, is that like this charming little documentarians are getting attacked by their own tribe for using a word that people didn't prefer. And maybe that's turning people off to the TLM because everyone's sniping at each other and being super petty. And I don't blame them for that.
Well, let's just be real honest. A lot of people that attend have a revenge of the nerds complex going on. Let's just be really honest, okay? There are a lot of people that aren't as big, aren't as athletic, aren't as whatever, nicely dressed, aren't as maybe financially successful. I'm not talking about all of them, but some of them. As people that they know are attending the Novus Ordo that they perceive as cooler in some worldly way. And they're like, look, I like having something over those people. Now, maybe this is a minority, but I know that this disordered psychology exists. So it's in some corner of the Latin Mass community. And I know because I've gone to the Latin Mass community for 15 years, 16 years. Okay? I've been a part of lots of different ones. Certain are better than others. But we're being real now because that's what you want. You want to call out Mass of the Ages for saying branding, and no one, whoever says branding, can be being real with it. It's okay, that's fine. It's a fair critique. It's just wrong. And I'm saying how it's wrong. How? Someone tell me how. Aside from the one guy who says Jesus is going to come down from heaven and just, he's waiting for Jesus to lead all the Novus Ordo people to an actual TLM parish. I don't really believe you believe that, by the way. Tell me how, without a major effort, which is us, the laity, making attractive the TLM, how are we ever going to get that 1.5% to be 95.5%? At which point the Novus Ordo will just die out. Because that's my dream, is the Novus Ordo dying out because bishops are cowards in the modern era. And once we get that number to 95.5 instead of 1.5%, or maybe probably even 85.5, we'll achieve critical mass, and the host organism of the Novus Ordo will die out. That's what I want. I have a plan of accomplishing that. I've been a part of helping to effectuate that. Lots of other people have been as well. What are you guys doing, besides praying to Jesus, to lead people from Novus Ordo communities to TLM communities? What are you realistically doing? I'll wait.
I think everybody could start by stop being so cantankerous and petty. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't want to go. If I were somebody that was going to Novus Ordo, I wouldn't want to go to a place where even the attendees are always infighting and biting.
No, see, I disagree there.
I wouldn't want to do that.
I disagree there, and here's why. I'll prove it right now. Cameron and Jake say that, and I disagree. Because there is more infighting than anywhere else on planet Earth in the TLM, and it's still worth going to, even with some of its awful denizens. So Cameron and Jake say that, and I disagree. I do disagree. The TLM has some of the most nitpicky, pearl-clutching prigs, it's a G at the end of that word, I've ever met. And it's totally worth going to. So I don't even think the people, the kind of nerdy, know-it-all-y, actually ethos of a lot of TLM communities would keep away a lot of Novus Ordo people. So I don't think and I think Jake and Cameron might disagree with me there. I think they think it needs to. I'd say with a lot of types that are just more athletic, robust types, they don't even know it exists. They just need to be told. I think they'll start going even with the actually Oscar Martinez kind of ethos of the TLM goers. So I disagree. I disagree with you there, Steph.
I just think that
it would make it easier if people were kind of nice, but that's probably not going to happen until we get some fresh blood.
I think a lot of people that are not going to the TLM are nervous to go just because it's so different and the language is different. And I think that if the people were, especially the women, were a lot more welcoming and just smiling and friendly, and there's not so much nitpicking, I think that some of those barriers would come down.
I agree. Or think of that part in Billy Madison when he goes his first day back in high school, Billy's. And he was a cool guy. This is like a Novus Ordo person. He was a cool guy sitting at the nerd table. And the nerds are having a little bit, they're kind of poking fun at him because he's forced to sit with the nerds, but the nerds are very smart usually. And so they're kind of making fun of him. He used to make fun of them. So there's a little bit of what Nietzsche calls ressentiment, or a slave morality, that thrives in Latin Mass communities. Not with me. If I see some Novus Ordo guy that doesn't know his wife's supposed to veil and his wife is like showing her cleavage or whatever, I would just kind of try to kindly, charitably say, hey, that's cool. You want to come here. Dude, that's all of us were new at some point. Your wife should probably cover her breasts. She should definitely cover her head and veil. You should learn the Latin Mass is a different missal. It's not just a different language. So it's going to follow different. It's going to follow a wholly different missal. And you should come on in. This is cool. But instead, a lot of the like nerds are kind of angry at the Novus Ordo people because of physical trappings of wealth or success or whatever. And so they're kind of mean to them. And then it gets into certain types will be strongly compelled enough by the natural truth and beauty of the TLM to stay, even though they're being kind of reverse discriminated against by the angry nerds. And some of the types are more finicky or mercurial and will leave. And then our numbers aren't as boosted. I just want the numbers boosted.
There's more comments.
Any other nerdy questions?
There's more comments. I'll read another one. But yeah, I was just saying, like, if I'm just some guy or some girl watching all this happen, like, if Mass of the Ages was attacked, I'd be like, well, these people, they can't even get along among themselves. I don't want to hang out with these people. They don't even like each other. Okay, here's another comment. Our Lord is the architect of the extraordinary for celebration of the Eucharist. Speak of it to the Lord's intent. No rebranding needed. Simply speak of it as it is. The one true celebration. So guys, that's what everybody's been doing. If anybody's failed, maybe it's us. Like, it's like, yeah, and we're not getting sensitive about it.
Well, wait, and now this sounds like an old guard comment. It's not the one true celebration of it. It's the superior one. Says I, and I'm going out on a limb until the eschaton. Maybe I just have really reverse taste, and at the end of the day, this will be kind of clown world. If the Lord's like, no, the Novus Ordo is actually the more beautiful expression of the Lex Orandi, I'll be like, am I in hell? Is this clown world? But it's the more beautiful expression of it. It's not the only valid one. Sorry. If you say that, then you've got bigger problems. There is another expression of the Lex Orandi. Sorry. The church says so. What am I going to listen to? The Holy Mother Church or some guy named Jim online, right? There are two forms of the right now. You're wrong. There are two forms of the right. There's not only one. Is that queer? Yes. I don't like it. Do we like it? No. Is it odd? Yes. Is it outlier with regard to all the other rights? Yes. But there are two rights. I'm sorry that you've been so badly miseducated on this. There are two rights. One's beautiful. We want to, as the laity, aid in the extirpation, the vituperation of the Novus Ordo. If you want to do that, you got to bring lots of your family and friends to the TLM. Guess what that's called? Rebranding. The language you use to get your family and friends to go to the TLM, that's called rebranding. I'm sorry it hurts to be wrong, and people went big on this on Twitter, so maybe that's what we're up against now. But all you're saying when you say, I don't believe in a rebranding of the TLM is, I'm not going to tell any family or friends about the TLM.
In a way that befits that person.
All right, in a way that's narrowly tailored to taste and things like that. Because the TLM is the truth. It has something for everyone. You ought to be able to find the point from the path from A to B. If you can't, then you're rhetorically challenged. But if you're unwilling to, then that just means you don't believe in the TLM enough to bring your family and friends to it. See, this is the kind of ridiculous conversation that would only be had among TLM goers. Is it a superior product? Yes, then bring as many people there as you can. I've done my part, and I'm continuing to.
And brand how you talk about the TLM to that person in a specific way. I mean, that's what you're doing when you're trying to convince somebody to go to the TLM. Somebody's asking, Tim, do you think the TLM priests need to go on offense and question why the Novus Ordo priests don't care about their laity as much? For example, shutting down the churches, or do you think it's a risk with the bishops?
I think it's a good idea. Yes, I think TLM priests being like, look, can we do a blind taste test? Can we do a go make a difference versus Dies Irae challenge? Ask 1,000 youths, what's a more beautiful song? Go make a difference or Dies Irae? Can we do a challenge across all portions of the dichotomy, new to old? And why don't you? Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Why don't you Novus Ordo priests care more? Here's one challenge that's sort of related, but only pros hen related. Only sort of in one accidental property related. The traditional priests need to challenge new priests about, you have what, a half hour of confession per week? This is probably old ladies getting free therapy, 6 minutes per old lady. That's 5 old ladies per week. 5 times 6. Your congregation is how many families? 300 families strong, 400 families strong. Are you giving out the Eucharist? Even if you're not giving out the Eucharist, these people are not getting confession. Why do you not care about the eternal souls? They're going to hell. All those people are going to hell if they're not going to confession regularly. Yes, I think confrontation is a good path forward, obviously.
This person brings up a really good point. Speaking about rebranding, they say many bishops are rebranding, in quotes, the TLM and not for the good. So obviously we should be countering that with branding the TLM in a positive way. Right.
Now, I don't agree with Jake and Cameron that hatred of Klaus Schwab or hatred of Barack Obama or hatred of, the pontificate of Francis or hatred of Anthony Fauci being muscular, being preponderant at the TLM, I don't think that that's a turnoff. Yes, is pretty much every TLM goer going to hate the pontificate of Francis because he's an express enemy? He's an express foe? Yes. Is that a turnoff? No. So I said this to Cameron and Jake, and I think they understood what I was saying. I don't think that is a major turnoff. I don't even think it should be that major a turnoff that so many TLM goers are bitter, dorky prigs, right? I think it's like, well, it is the superior product. I want to be here, even if the people look a little bit angry or look a little bit constipated or look a little bit like if I threw a football at them, they'd hit the deck. Threw the football as a pass to them, they'd hit the deck. It's still worth going. I've been going for 16 years, and that's what they look like a lot of times. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Yeah.
Okay, so this person's asking, what are the marketing words that are appropriate to get them to understand we are talking about our ancient church?
Just what I told my students when I was teaching, what I tell my friends. Look, do you want something beautiful and ancient? And do you want to really believe that the Eucharist is the source and the summit of the faith? Something that'll make you believe? Go to the Latin Mass. Do you want to feel like someone's selling you an old jalopy, like Shia LaBeouf said? Do you want to be sold? Do you want to be sold an inferior product with a bunch of boomer ladies standing around clapping their hands and pretending it's beautiful even though it's tacky? Go to the Novus Ordo. It will turn you into an atheist if you're the right kind of temperament. It did to me. That's enough. That's rebranding, by the way. That's not what the old guard Latin Mass people say. They don't say that. They just quietly go to the TLM and I think enjoy that they're part of the secret esoteric club of people that have a beautiful liturgy. Well, I say everyone deserves it. And if you say that we shouldn't rebrand, then you're saying the Novus Ordo should continue to exist. I want to drive it out of existence through the preponderance of the TLM combined with the cowardice of the bishops. And the way to do that is to rebrand it. Any other questions? We didn't get a lot of years there, by the way.
We did. They were right. writing a lot. People were just saying in chat, like, what year they started without a question. But a
Okay.
lot of 2020, 2018, some old guard Catholics as well. So
We knew there would be them. But most people that are YouTube audience are late 2018, 2019, 2020. And that's because there was a major rebrand of the Latin Mass. That's not to be disrespectful to the old guard, who in many senses of the term maintained it, kept it going, kept the lights on. It's not strictly speaking true, because we could have turned the lights back on after 20 or 30 years, but let's give some credit. But they did nothing to repopularize it. That was a second push. That was a second branding effort. And, it was an exciting time in 2018, 2019. It was a lot of energy that was going in the right direction. And we could have a third push now that Francis is what happened specifically, then I'm gonna quit, is there's the rebranding of the Latin Mass in late 2018. A lot of people were watching TNT in those days and saying, let's try this out. And they'd come up to us, me and Taylor at Mass, across the country from each other, and they'd say, this is awesome. It was beautiful. And they're like, I didn't even know this was a thing. My friend, Dr. Michael Robillard, smart man, was like, I felt like I've been robbed of my birthright. He's one of the litany of folks I brought to his first Latin Mass. I feel like I've been robbed of my birthright. How many people have told me that? Michael's extremely eloquent and always has the perfect turn of phrase for the moment. But lots of people were trying to say that. I feel like I've been robbed of my birthright. Then lots of people said almost that. Okay? That was a new moment. Then Francis pushed back on that. The evil people in the church pushed back on that. They were threatened by that because they want, for some reason, a lot of nominally Catholic atheists, which is what the Novus Ordo does to a lot of people. Maybe not all people, but it does it to a lot. So now we need a response and another rebranding, a response to the response. That's all we're talking about here. Is there one more question?
Somebody is saying, what is the difference of Timothy and Protestants in attacking the Pope? That's a real brain buster. Do you want to tackle that?
It sounds like, are we a native English speaker, or are we in an ESL situation here? The difference of Timothy and Protestant is that I'm a Roman Catholic. The difference is Canon 212. Lots of canons that cross-pollinate 212 that urge us to correct our prelates. And also, I'll quote Robert Bellarmine, which is not a big Protestant thing, you might have noticed, that prelates can be wicked. We have to abide a wicked prelate. We do not have to say that a wicked prelate is not wicked. It's Robert Bellarmine. Strong teaching on that. So thank you from overseas to whoever asked that question. God bless you guys all. Remember, on that note, if you want to support this channel, Patreon and Donor Box, two forms of supporting the channel. One is you get something in return. One is strictly a donative gift here at the end of the year. That's really the best way, really the only way, if I'm being honest, to keep the lights on. Please become a new patron or Donor Box donor today. God bless you all. We have Royce White on Wednesday and hopefully Paul Kanger with his new exciting Bella Dodd book on Friday. But Royce White on Wednesday, that's going to be a great show. God bless you all. Peace. Deus Volt.